Thank you so much for allowing me to speak here today. And I've already been very inspired with the conversations happening because normally I find that I'm, on this journey alone. So I have some people that I want to follow up with after this. Hi, Sam. But I'm the founder of Period Reality, and we, our global movement towards gender equity through system level change by educating about and advocating for living in sync with your cycle. And this idea was actually born from me coming across the idea of the four phases of the cycle in the first place. From the Netherlands, quite an open-minded country with good access to education. And I had never thought about anything else in my cycle as a few days a month where I menstruate. And then when I came to the family planning phase of my life, I started to pay attention to my ovulation, but actually realizing that your menstrual cycle lasts for how long it lasts, and it's cyclical, and we're cyclical beings, what was quite new to me. So I went onto Google, I typed in, four phases of the menstrual cycle or cyclical living. And the first hit I got was a book called The Optimized Woman. And that then just pissed me off. So I had a great job at that time, no intention of leaving my job. So I continued to Google, hoping to find people in this space who were talking about cyclical living, cycle awareness, and all the things that we're talking about in a way that I could resonate with, and I couldn't. And I found that the only few people talking about it were in North America, Northern Europe, talking in very non-inclusive language. We heard that before about the 4 seasons, which doesn't translate geographically. They talk about it being your superpower. Through my previous work, I worked with girls in India who are being locked away in a goat shed for a week a month, and they're not allowed to go to school. You can't really go to them and be like, embrace it, let's celebrate it. So that really stuck with me. And then I realized, okay, but what is the way to have this conversation on a broader scale? So we actually did some research, not in an academic sense. Anyone who wants to partner with us from that perspective, I'm very open to that. But we did our own research for 2 years trying to figure out, if no one is talking about this at a global scale, why not? And how can we contribute? And we realized that obviously the reason why is because of the taboo and the sensitivities around the topic. And then the way forward that we saw to have this conversation on a global scale was through storytelling. And that's where the name Period Reality came from, that if we allow a safe space for people to share stories, even if it's anonymously, about how they experience their cycle throughout the month, education can take place. Oh, sorry, Anne, you told me specifically what button to hit. This slide is kind of, I don't think this is needed for this room, but it's a very relevant topic that I think, especially through storytelling, we found that because we're talking about lived experiences, it actually doesn't only apply for half the population, but really it's about 8 billion people who somehow interact with it. We've got this saying where we say you either have a menstrual cycle, but you're definitely born from the power of one. So it's like, it's a little bit ridiculous if people are not really paying attention to it in the most respectful way. So this is what it kind of looks like. And again, for this room, that might make a lot of sense, but there is some importance here when we talk about educating people about their cycle. And it's about moving away from just having the conversation around when people are bleeding. There's a lot of anecdotes and lived experiences of people who say they feel different during different parts of their cycle. Some people refer to it as the 2 phases, the 3 phases, the 4 phases. But the point being that you might feel differently depending on where you are in your cycle. The male hormonal cycle looks very different. We'll get to that in a second. And we live in a world that is designed around a 24-hour hormonal cycle of men. And with that comes an expectation to show up consistently, whether that's our Monday to Friday or 9 to 5. And that's just not really how people with cycles are built. So we've got something that we call the reality rule. And that is the only thing that's true is what is true for you. How do you find out what's true for you? That's through paying attention to what's going on in your body. And we think cycle tracking is a great way to do that. But we look at cycle tracking slightly differently than just tracking when you start and when you finish your cycle, but actually paying attention to the little things around how does your confidence might fluctuate throughout the month, maybe your energy levels, your mood, things like that. And really important to, with that, keep in mind that the only thing that's true is what is true for you. Well, this is, I think, what kind of summarizes what we're dealing with. And what we're looking at is really that systemic level of how can we have conversations to look at things like productivity differently. We find that there is an interest from businesses and organizations to have this conversation. And I actually love to involve in that conversation to say, rather than bringing me in to talk about how you can have a higher ROI from a productivity perspective. How can you change the way that you work with your company or your people, more importantly, to just appreciate that we're cyclical beings and that we're all different. Very simple example of that. I just spoke to someone about that schools tell their teachers, this is the window where you have to do your parent teacher evenings. If you're in your period, you've been in front of a class for 7 hours already, to then do 3 hours of 10-minute back-to-back conversation with parents. That might not feel great, also not great for the school or for parents. So even if schools would say, this is a 3-week window, you pick whenever that would be best for you, that would be great. So I believe there's no gender equity without menstrual equity, and that is why we advocate for cycle awareness. It's a cycle awareness revolution, and this is how you can get in touch. Thank you.